Ripple through South Africa's first coalition government. Parliament's Appropriations Chair Mmusi Maimane is raising the alarm. Even if one department vote in the appropriation bill fails, the whole national budget could collapse. He joins us to unpack what's really at stake and why the GNU needs to get its act together fast. Dr. Mmusi Maimane, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning and good morning to fellow South Africans, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, firstly, congratulations on the PhD, and tell us how you feel about that. I mean, it must have been quite a bit of effort that went into it.
It's been a great privilege to be able to achieve the PhD. But as you know, all of us are servants of God, and so I thank God for just being able to get this achievement, and then also just it feels like a deep sense of responsibility being bestowed upon you to do something with it beyond that, because academics for academics' sake are but one thing, but the other thing is that how do we serve the people, and I've been so humbled to see how many South Africans have been able to celebrate, which has really given us a sense of deep pride, but it's humbling to know that you have to serve people. So I'm deeply grateful. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Now, for the perspective of our listeners, right? Can you explain to us in layman's terms, now that the budget has been passed in a broader sense, as appropriations chair, what is the process around appropriation and what's at stake here?
It was certainly the budget is tabled in it's a three-part process. The first one is the fiscal framework, which gives us the broad overview of the macroeconomics, where the revenue models come from. So how you intend to raise money, so taxation and different things like that start there. Then the second part of the budget is what is called a division of revenue bill, which is, if you like, a vertical allocation of money. So that goes national, provincial, and then cities, and then what the proportions go into there. The third part of that is then what is an appropriations bill, which is then what gives the horizontal allocations, which is what the national departments look like. So, and that bill is split over 41 votes, which are obviously starting vote 1 is the presidency, 2 is parliament, 3, I think, is you then go through them: health, education, police, etc., all the way up to 41. And what effectively happens is that the third bill holds as a whole. So you can't say that what the law says is that what Parliament can do is that if you think there's 200 rands been given to education and 100 rands been given to health, and you'd like health to have 150 rand, it means you'd have to adjust education and adjust health. So if you reject one vote, the whole thing falls apart, because just like anyone who has ever done a budget knows that if you change one number, the others change also. So then you would have to reject the entire appropriations bill, which is only the national departments. It would then come back to our committee. We then do work on all of those numbers that you've described. But because there's been such a delay, what all of that then eventually means is that by the 1st of August, because it's past 4 months after the passing of the budget, what would then happen is that departments would then go down to spending 10% of their allocations from last year, which effectively then means, if it's a police station, we only have 10% of the budget for all the police in the country. And there's not a single national department that has a salary bill less than 10%, let alone operations less than 10%. So it would be effectively crippling government to a standstill.
In other words, coalition partners within the GNU especially will have to get the act in order. We know that there's a lot of political horse trading that takes place behind the scenes to get things passed in Parliament. But yeah, as you've just explained, even one department's vote, if it fails, it affects the entire budget, the entire process.
Yeah, and I think the lesson that I take from here is that we need to go back to a space where we can say, what are the national priorities? Because when you are the budget as has been put forward now is really a representation of the historical practice of of the ANC, if you like, because they've been in government for a number of years. And so coalition partners have come, they've been elected, they've elected a president, and then they've put themselves into cabinet positions. But the GNU has never come back to say, actually, the legacy of the GNU is going to be that we fix crime, or we did this, or we did that. Because if you don't have that, what happens after that is that you don't have what is the annual performance plans, which are the things that you give to each department to say, here are then your priorities in order to achieve the grand plan. And then what happens is that you can't fund easily. You can't then decide what your budget priorities are. Let me think about it differently. If you said to me, our priority is dealing with crime, which I think all of us as South Africans realize that perhaps maybe ahead of even how we create jobs and all of that is to keep citizens safe, because no one invests in places that are not safe, etc. It would mean that if that becomes the number one budget item, there are a couple of things we've got to think about. Police, when they were well funded in 2010, 2011, murder actually came down, which tells you that if you put money into policing, crime in fact comes down. We have less police today than we had in 2012, as an example. So we've got about 180,000 odd funded posts, but in 2012, we had 192,000, just thereabouts. Or if the third thing that you do is you say you want to increase the number of police stations and put more vehicles, then you say if the total budget of the police is 81% is spent on manpower, how do we increase that so that we can ensure that there's more police, but also make sure there are vehicles, technology, all of that? Which means there are other things then you start to cut. You say, I don't need a bloated cabinet. I'm going to take 3 billion rands, half the cabinet, and take 3 billion rands and put that into policing. I don't need agencies that exists that are employ about 177,000 people, and no one really knows how many of these agencies do MDDA, and I can go through a whole list of them. I'm going to cut them to put into policing. Then suddenly you've got a bigger manpower, and then you change the policy to say, can I merge police with metro police, etc., so that we take a very aggressive stance against crime. But if we don't have that priority, then the budget is just, well, what did we do last year? Let's just add 3% or inflation related. And then we really end up with more or less of the same outcomes year after year. It is time now that we create priorities, prioritize crime, prioritize economic growth. South Africa will be a different place. But without priority, this budget process is always going to be fraught by politics, because even those who said they didn't want to vote for any particular department didn't do so because they thought we're going to deal with money. They did so because they said, can I then go and play politics and remove this minister or that? These are things that our politicians must argue about, not suffer. That the people can't suffer because of those politics.
Finally, then, you suggesting that public consultation must feature more prominently in the budget process. How so?
Well, the budget is a law. It is a law like any other, and our lawmaking process compels us to do public consultation. So if you'll remember, in version 1 of the budget, we actually went all the way up to Polokwane and invited communities to come and make submissions. And we're saying more of that must be done, because the government doesn't invent money. It takes money from you and I. So if it does that and it takes money from citizens, the citizens must also have a voice about what needs to happen. Because at the end of the day, the greatest risk is that you leave politicians who eventually don't live lives that are similar to what citizens are, to be able to make decisions about citizens. And whereas what I'm saying is, it's the person who goes to a clinic who knows what money must be allocated to a clinic. It's a person who lives in an informal settlement. It's the person who goes to a police station to report a crime. Who knows? And they must have a higher voice. And the law compels us to do so. So we are really urging that as the next budget cycle, we must start early. We must invite citizens, because people are not represented at Treasury. They are only represented in Parliament. And the citizens must come to Parliament to come and make submissions about their budget. It is the people's budget, and we have to be a people-centric government. And I would really urge that the future of this country requires us to be much more engaged with the people of this country. Otherwise, People will voice their views. They won't do it through legislative processes. They will do it through protests. They will do it through street justice. And once that voice is amplified, then the country will descend into anarchy.
Dr. Maimane, thank you for your time.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. That was the Appropriations Chair in Parliament, Dr. Mmusi Maimane, talking to us about how the process will unfold and why it's an intricate but very important process. If one department's budget fails, it impacts the entire process. And this is not the time for parties to play politics. Rather, they should focus on ensuring that the budgets are allocated and that South Africans do not suffer, and that South Africa should actually have a say going forward or more of a say in the budget process. It's just